You know that person who barely says a word in group settings, the one everyone assumes has nothing to contribute. They might actually be the smartest person in the room. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why silence doesn't mean emptiness. Look, we've all been taught that the loudest voice wins. The person who talks the most must know the most, right? But here's what nobody tells you. While everyone else is busy talking, quiet people are doing something completely different. Something that gives them an edge most people don't even realize exists. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why some of the most brilliant minds in history were also some of the quietest. So here's the thing that bothers me. We live in a world that won't shut up. Seriously, think about it. From the moment you wake up, you're bombarded with noise, social media notifications, news alerts, podcasts, music. Everyone's got an opinion about everything, and they're all screaming to be heard. And in this chaos, we've created this weird assumption that if you're not talking, you're not thinking. If you're not constantly sharing your thoughts, you must not have any. Quiet people get labeled as shy, awkward, or even slow. Teachers worry about the quiet kid in class. Managers overlook the quiet employee. Friends assume the quiet one isn't having fun. But here's where it gets interesting. While we're all obsessed with who's talking the loudest, we've completely missed what's happening inside the minds of people who choose silence. And trust me, what's happening in there is way more intense than most people realize. Let me break down what's actually going on in a quiet person's head, because it's not what you think. First off, quiet people aren't quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're processing everything at a much deeper level. While someone else is already talking about their weekend plans, a quiet person is still analyzing the 17 different layers of the conversation that just happened 5 minutes ago. Think of it like this. Imagine your brain is a computer. Most people run their thoughts on a single screen, everything happening right there in the open, displayed for everyone to see. But quiet people, they're running like 50 tabs in the background. They're cross-referencing information, finding patterns, making connections between things that happened 3 years ago and something you just said. Psychologists call this internal processing, and it's actually a sign of deeper cognitive function. Research from Stanford University found that people who spend more time in internal thought tend to have more active default mode networks in their brains. This is the part of your brain that's responsible for imagination, empathy, and complex problem solving. So when a quiet person is staring off into space during a meeting, they're not zoning out. They're solving problems you didn't even know existed yet. Here's something else most people miss. Quiet people notice everything, and I mean everything. When you're busy talking, you're focused on what you're going to say next. You're thinking about how you sound, whether people are laughing at your jokes, if you're making sense. Your brain is occupied with output, but when you're quiet, your brain switches to input mode, and that's when the magic happens. Quiet people pick up on micro-expressions. They notice when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. They catch the tiny pause before someone answers a question. They see the glance two people exchange across the room. They register the change in someone's tone when a specific topic comes up. This isn't some superpower. It's just basic psychology. When you're not focused on speaking, your brain has bandwidth to process everything else. It's like the difference between trying to text while walking versus actually watching where you're going. When you're not divided, you see more. And here's the crazy part. This observational ability compounds over time. The more you notice, the better you get at reading situations. The better you read situations, the more you understand people. The more you understand people, the smarter your decisions become. There's actually research backing this up. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people who scored high on introspection and observation were significantly better at predicting outcomes in social situations. They could tell when someone was lying, when a relationship was about to end, or when a business deal was going south, all before the obvious signs showed up. Now let's talk about depth, because this is where quiet people really pull ahead. Most conversations are surface level. We talk about the weather, what we did last weekend, what we're watching on Netflix. Nothing wrong with that. But quiet people, they're usually not interested in surface level anything. When a quiet person finally does speak, they've often thought about the topic from 10 different angles. They've considered the implications, the contradictions, the nuances. They've connected it to other ideas, other experiences, other knowledge they have. This is why quiet people often say things that stop conversations, not because it's weird, but because it's so unexpectedly deep that everyone needs a second to process it. I remember reading about Susan Cain, the author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts. She spent 7 years researching and writing that book. 7 years of deep thought, deep research, deep analysis. And when it finally came out, it changed how millions of people think about introversion and silence. That's the power of depth. While everyone else is having 100 shallow conversations, quiet people are having a few profound thoughts. And those profound thoughts, they're the ones that actually change things. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. Silence is directly linked to creativity. You know how your best ideas come to you in the shower, or right before you fall asleep, or during a long walk. That's not a coincidence. That's your brain finally getting the quiet it needs to make creative connections. Quiet people live in that space more often. They're not constantly filling the silence with noise, so their brains have more opportunities to wander, to explore, to create. Neuroscientists have found that when your brain isn't focused on external stimuli, it starts making random connections between unrelated concepts. This is literally how innovation happens. Steve Jobs didn't come up with the idea for the iPhone in a brainstorming session. It came from connecting dots between calligraphy, technology, and human behavior during periods of deep thought. Einstein was famously quiet. He spent hours just sitting and thinking. Newton did the same. Marie Curie worked in silence. Nikola Tesla had a rich internal world that most people couldn't even begin to understand. These weren't people who were great despite being quiet. They were great because they were quiet. The silence gave their minds room to work in ways that constant noise never could. Let's talk about energy for a second, because this is crucial. Talking requires energy. Socializing requires energy. Being on all the time requires massive amounts of energy. And where does that energy come from? Your brain. When you're constantly engaging in external communication, your brain is working overtime. It's processing language, reading social cues, managing your presentation, monitoring responses. It's exhausting. Quiet people conserve this energy. And what do they do with all that saved energy? They use it for thinking, for analyzing, for creating, for solving problems. It's like the difference between a phone that's constantly running apps versus one that's on power-saving mode. The phone on power-saving mode has way more battery life for when you actually need it. This is why quiet people often excel in fields that require sustained mental effort. Programming, writing, research, engineering. These aren't fields where talking more helps you. They're fields where thinking more helps you. And quiet people have more mental energy available for exactly that. Here's something most people don't realize. Quiet people have incredibly strong mental filters. Before a quiet person speaks, their thought goes through multiple checkpoints. Is this relevant? Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? Does this add value? Most thoughts don't make it past these checkpoints, which is why quiet people speak less. But here's the thing. This filtering process isn't a weakness, it's a strength. When a quiet person does speak, what comes out is usually refined, thought out, and valuable. There's no verbal diarrhea, no rambling, no speaking just to fill the silence. Compare this to people who speak without filtering. They contradict themselves. They say things they don't mean. They hurt people without realizing it. They share information they shouldn't. They waste everyone's time with thoughts that aren't fully formed. The filter isn't about being scared to speak. It's about respecting the value of words. It's about understanding that once you say something, you can't take it back. It's about quality over quantity. So here's where we get to the really interesting part, the paradox of quiet people. They're often perceived as having less going on in their heads, when in reality, they have exponentially more. They're seen as less intelligent, when they're often more observant. They're treated as if they have nothing to contribute, when they're sitting on insights that could change everything. And here's the kicker. This misconception works in their favor. Think about it. While everyone is underestimating them, quiet people are learning. They're observing, they're thinking, they're preparing. And when the moment comes when they need to act, when they need to speak, when they need to make their move, they're ready in ways that shock everyone around them. This is why the quiet person often becomes the dark horse, the unexpected winner, the one nobody saw coming, because while everyone was focused on the loud ones, the quiet one was getting ready. I'm reminded of that quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it goes something like, "The lion doesn't roar before it hunts." Quiet people understand this instinctively. Making noise isn't the same as making progress. Being loud isn't the same as being effective. But here's what I really want you to understand. This isn't about quiet people being better than everyone else. That's not the point. The point is that we've built a society that values the wrong things. We value confidence over competence. We value charisma over capability. We value who can sell themselves the best, not who can actually deliver the best results. And in doing this, we've created a world where quiet people are constantly pressured to be someone they're not, to speak up more, to be more outgoing, to come out of their shell, as if being quiet is some kind of prison they need to escape from. But what if the shell isn't a prison? What if it's armor? What if it's a laboratory? What if it's exactly where they need to be to do their best work? The loudest minds aren't loud because they need external validation. They're loud internally because they're constantly processing, analyzing, creating, connecting. The noise is happening where it matters most, inside their heads, where real thinking happens. Look, here's what I need you to take away from this. If you're a quiet person, stop apologizing for it. Stop feeling like you need to change. Your mind isn't empty just because your mouth is closed. What's happening inside your head has value, even if you're not broadcasting it to the world. The depth of your thoughts, the quality of your observations, the creativity of your ideas, these things matter. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're less than because you process internally. And if you're not a quiet person, start paying attention to them. The person who hasn't spoken in the last hour might have the answer everyone's been looking for. The colleague who sits quietly in meetings might see the problem from an angle nobody else has considered. The friend who mostly listens might understand you better than anyone who constantly talks. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for thoughts to grow, space for ideas to develop, space for understanding to deepen. And in a world that never stops talking, that space is more valuable than ever. The quietest people often have the loudest minds because, while everyone else is busy making noise, they're busy making sense of it all. They're finding patterns in the chaos. They're seeing connections others miss. They're thinking thoughts that haven't been thought before. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the world needs more of. Less noise, more thought. Less performance, more substance. Less talking, more understanding. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you say, it's about how much you actually have to say. And quiet people, they usually have way more than you'd ever expect. Subscribe if this changed how you see quiet people.